She was just the medic, quiet, invisible, underestimated. Until the pilot took a bullet mid-flight, and she took control. What no one knew: the nurse was actually a ghost, an erased legend once known as Revenant. My name is Sofia Reyes, 34 years old, born in Valparaiso, Chile, and standing just over 5'4", with arms that never quite looked strong enough to lift a rifle. That's what the others saw, anyway. A medic, a whisper, a passenger on missions where steel nerves and firepower were currency. I was the one who wrapped the wounds, not the one who made them. The truth? They barely noticed me until the sky fell apart. It started on a mission deep in the Naru Gorge, dust-choked mountains, terrain so jagged drones refused to fly through it. Our job was classified. Drop in. Monitor activity at an enemy stronghold. Extract. Routine, they said. Routine never kills you. But that day, it nearly did. I sat in the back of the transport chopper, behind the SEALs from Echo Shadow Team. 8 of them. Hard men with hardened smiles. They passed a protein bar around like a cigar and joked about the heat, about the boredom, about how dead weight always gets added to ops like these. "Hey Reyes," one of them said, his grin just a little too sharp. "You sure you're ready to patch bullet holes with band-aids and hope?" I smiled without showing teeth. I brought extra tape. That got a chuckle, but I wasn't joking. Not entirely. They never knew the full loadout in my med pack. Not one of them ever saw the secondary layer under the gauze, where I kept a collapsible sidearm, adrenaline syringes, encrypted comm beacons, and a small patch with a logo so Black Ops it had no name. Only a glyph, sewn into memory and protocol. They never asked about it because they never looked. To them, I was just the quiet medic. The invisible one. Fine by me. When we lifted off from base at 0400, I kept to my usual role. Silent. Still. Just a shadow strapped in the back corner, checking vitals on the squad with a glance. Nobody suspected I could fly that bird better than the man at the stick. Nobody guessed I had clocked over 1,900 flight hours before I ever touched a suture kit. I kept my head low, chin tucked, eyes constantly scanning. I counted every twitch in the control panel, memorized the map without needing to open one. And when the pilot turned and said, "You ever smile back there, Reyes?" I simply adjusted a loose harness and replied, "Only when there's no turbulence." They laughed. That easy, dismissive laugh soldiers use when they think they're untouchable. I didn't laugh. I was listening, watching, preparing. I wasn't there by accident. You don't get assigned to a SEAL transport mission unless someone up the chain thinks you're useful, or dangerous, or both. But the SEALs? They didn't know that. They saw the soft-spoken woman with dark hair tied tight, clipboard always near, notepad scrawled with vitals and prep notes. One called me Nurse Nancy once. I let it slide. Mockery is camouflage. It tells them you're not a threat, that you belong behind, not ahead. It makes them underestimate you. That's the most powerful tool in the field. Let them believe you're just background. They didn't notice how I watched the pilot's fingers, how I tracked altitude drops and turbulence curves, or how I pre-calculated emergency descent angles based on current drag ratios. No one noticed because no one cared to look. They only started to care when the cockpit went silent. We were maybe 8 minutes out from the LZ, skimming between mountain ridges, so tight you could feel the wind changing personalities. The first impact was clean, through the windshield. A sniper round. No warning. Blood sprayed. The pilot never even screamed. He just collapsed forward, lifeless, and the stick jerked. Then came the shouting. The pilots hit. Jesus Christ, we're going down. The bird tipped hard to port, rotors screaming like banshees. The SEALs scrambled, some grabbed straps, others shouted into radios that were already full of static. Panic moved fast. One of them screamed, "We're done. We're finished." That's when I moved. It was automatic. My body knew what to do before my mind caught up. I unclipped, pushed past a tumbling medkit, and grabbed the stick with both hands. The seat was still warm from the pilot's body. Blood was drying on the throttle. I took the controls, clipped in, and said only 4 words. "Hold tight. I've got this." They went silent, because I didn't sound like a medic anymore. The cockpit was chaos, alarms flaring, systems failing, rotors vibrating under asymmetrical torque. But to me, it was a language I had once spoken fluently, and I was speaking it again. Sophia, what the hell are you doing? That was Delgado, the squad's comms chief, still clutching his helmet like it could somehow explain the world tipping sideways. Flying, I replied. The chopper dipped, blades clawing at thin air. I leaned the stick right, foot steady on the rudder pedal. My hands didn't shake. Couldn't afford to. Brace for stabilization. I called out, voice flat, firm. Countering yaw. 30 seconds. No one answered. But the noise in the cabin changed. The shouts quieted. The panic dimmed. They were listening now. Even through the blood on the console and the blaring red of the fuel pressure alert, my training kicked in. Tactile memory. Response time. I'd drilled this 1,000 times. Not in a simulator. Not on a flight line. But in real hot zones, under fire, with outcomes that either ended in body bags or medals no one ever pinned. And this was just another day. Reyes to all Allied units. Aircraft Raven 02 under hostile fire, pilot down. Taking control. Commencing evasive. My voice hit military net. Systems tried to authenticate it. Failed. Then tried again. And failed again. Because I wasn't supposed to exist. That's when it happened. The chime that changed everything. The encrypted ID beacon I'd forgotten was still integrated in my biosuit blinked on. Just for a fraction of a second. Long enough for automated comms to ping back with 2 words. Call sign, Revenant. Up in the sky, half a world away, a fighter pilot monitoring the same frequency froze. Command, he said, nearly dropping his oxygen mask. Did you see that? Call sign Revenant just lit green. That can't be right, came the response. Revenant is dead, the pilot whispered. Yeah, that's what I thought. Back in the cockpit, I eased the pitch, stabilizing lift as we cleared the tightest part of the canyon. The bird was wounded, but flying. The SEALs had gone utterly quiet. One of them finally found his voice. You're not a medic, he said. I am, I replied. Another leaned closer. Then what the hell is a medic doing flying us out of a kill box with textbook evasives? I had a former life, I said. Keep your belts on. They didn't speak again. It was ironic. I'd lived under layers for years. Layers of identity, layers of silence, layers of assignments so black they erased your name afterward. My service file was sealed tighter than nuclear protocols. And now, the encryption they used to bury me had just lit up the entire comms net like a ghost returning from the grave. One voice broke the silence. You're Revenant. It wasn't a question, just a truth dragged out of a legend. I didn't answer. I was too busy dodging the next round of fire. Another spray of bullets clipped the tail rotor, jarring us sideways. Tails compromised, I muttered. Compensating pitch. The bird groaned like it was dying. But I coaxed it onward, fighting gravity with hands that remembered too much. Then came the voice over wideband. Unidentified aircraft, state your intent. Your signal pings as hostile. Repeat, identify now. I flicked the comms to private. This is Revenant. Combat retrieval under duress. Crew injured. Pilot Kia. Aircraft control assumed. Do not engage. There was a pause. A long one. Then a voice whispered, she's alive. Another voice, higher rank, snapped back. Weapons hold. I repeat, weapons hold. All assets, stand down. Revenant's active. The SEALs didn't know what to do with that. But I did. I pushed the bird lower into the valley, used the geography like armor. Masked our thermal signature with downdrafts. This was the part they always forgot. Flying isn't just physics. It's poetry, under pressure. Strap the wounded, I told the team. Tactical descent coming up. One of them, the same guy who called me Nurse Nancy, finally asked the question out loud. Why didn't anyone tell us who you were? Because I wasn't supposed to be anyone anymore, I said. They fell quiet again. Outside, the landscape blurred into a green-brown smear. Up ahead, cloud cover thickened. And I saw it, the only ridge that would offer any concealment. If we could reach it. But I knew what was coming next. The enemy had scrambled intercepts. Not aircraft, but ground launchers. I'd seen this pattern before. These bastards knew how to bottleneck an exit. So I made the call. Reyes to command. I'm going to need fighter cover. And medevac. Prepare secondary LZ. Negative. You're behind enemy lines. That's never stopped me before. Static crackled. Then another pause. Then, acknowledged. Revenant, proceed. I smiled faintly. The ghost had returned. The bird was leaking hydraulics by the time I cleared the third ridge. My hands adjusted trim with the precision of someone who's done it blindfolded. But this time, I wasn't flying alone. I had 8 soldiers depending on me, and no margin for error. The airframe creaked, strained by maneuvers it hadn't been built for. I could feel every vibration, every fluctuation in engine torque. My fingers worked instinctively, coaxing power from a system that should have failed 10 minutes ago. Behind me, I heard shifting, someone unbuckling. I glanced over my shoulder. The team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dyer, moved forward, bracing himself against the side rail. "I need to know who I'm trusting with my men," he said, voice low but firm. I didn't answer at first, just kept flying. He waited. Then, I finally said, "You're trusting the only reason this aircraft isn't a smoldering crater on the side of a mountain." He stared at me for a long second, then gave a curt nod. "Fair enough." Another voice piped up from behind. Young, probably barely out of selection. I heard stories about Revenant. Said she pulled a blackout evac out of Basra with no NAV, no comms, no backup. I didn't turn around. That was a long time ago. Dyer looked at me. "They said she was Kia. Vanished." "They said a lot of things," I muttered. Not all of them were true. He took that in, then returned to his seat. Below us, enemy chatter was picking up. I scanned the comm bands. Signals were bouncing across known insurgent frequencies, tracking us. We had a window of 15 minutes, maybe less, before they'd coordinate another strike. We needed altitude. I yanked the stick and pulled us up, nose slicing the wind. The bird protested, groaning under strain, but she held, climbing to 3,200. We're punching through cloud cover. Someone coughed behind me. Blood, wet and thick. I glanced back. One of the SEALs, Thorne, I think, was pale, soaked in red. "We've got wounded," Dyer said. "He's critical." "I know," I replied. "We'll get him down." Another transmission crackled through comms. This one encrypted. I recognized the channel. Very few people knew it existed. "Revenant," said the voice. "This is Command Delta. We need confirmation. Are you operational?" "I've been operational since the moment your pilot dropped dead," I replied. "I need a corridor and air support. Get me to grid 759er, and I'll bring them out." Static. Then, corridor opening. F-35 patrol inbound. ETA 6 minutes. Call signs Echo 1 and Echo 2. Confirm coordination. I confirmed. To the SEALs, I was just a phantom pulling strings they didn't even know existed. But the sky? The sky remembered me. It hit me then, as we leveled out. Years ago, I'd flown similar ops. Covert retrievals, deniable insertions, night runs with no IFF and no expectation of return. One in particular, in the Takurgar region, had gone sideways fast. I pulled 3 teams out under fire, flying blackout, no support. They'd called me Revenant after that, a name for something that shouldn't still exist, but did. Later, they erased me. Not because I failed, but because I saw things I wasn't supposed to. A mission that went wrong. Collateral no one wanted to acknowledge. I was offered a choice: vanish quietly with benefits, or make noise and get buried. I vanished, but I never stopped watching. The medical assignment was the cover. Away back in, somewhere deep in NATO command, someone still believed I was useful, or too dangerous to leave idle. That's how I ended up on this bird, sitting quietly in the back, pretending I didn't know what it was like to fly through a war zone. And now, I was right back in it. Echo 1 on station. Came the voice over comms. Smooth, confident. "Revenant, we have eyes." "Copy that. I'm pushing coordinates for intercept. Light up the ridge at grid 719er. That's where they're setting up launch." "Roger. Weapons hot." Seconds later, the sky lit up. A single air-to-ground missile lanced downward, followed by the blossom of fire over the mountain. The SEALs cheered. But I didn't relax. That was just one threat. There were more. I banked left, felt the rotors shudder, and began scanning for a safe place to put us down. Our bird wasn't going to last much longer. A red light blinked. Fuel line rupture. My voice stayed even. Brace for hard descent. "I'm setting us down." "You've got a place in mind?" Dyer called. "I do," I said. "We used it once in a storm back in 17. It'll hold." He stared at me. "You've been here before?" I allowed myself the smallest smile. "You'd be surprised how often I've flown over ghosts." The terrain came up fast, jagged and mean, like broken teeth in the earth. But I'd seen this place before, in another life, on another run they never put in the reports. I slowed the descent, bleeding altitude with surgical precision. The SEALs behind me braced, holding wounded, weapons, each other. The rotor was starting to stutter. Left bank weakening. I adjusted torque input manually, compensating for a failing tail rotor. She's not going to make it, one of them said. She'll make it. I replied, not sure if I meant the bird or myself. The spot I had in mind was a carved-out plateau, a scar left behind by an old NATO airlift project that got abandoned before it was finished. It wasn't on any maps anymore. Just a flat piece of rock with sheer drop-offs on 3 sides and enough space to spin a rotor if you knew what you were doing. No lights, no beacon, just memory. I lined her up, dropping fast. In 3, I warned. 2, 1. We hit hard. The skids screamed across stone, and everything inside the bird went weightless for a second before slamming back into reality. Metal crunched. The nose dipped. I yanked the stick back. The tail swung out. Once, then twice, before we finally jolted to a stop. Smoke hissed from the engine vents. But we were down. And alive. Dyer exhaled like he hadn't breathed since takeoff. You're out of your damn mind, he muttered. I unbuckled, checked Thorne's vitals. Still weak, but stable for now. I grabbed the medkit and moved fast. No more pretending to just observe. I was triaging, treating, commanding. Secondary bleed. Liver, I said, pointing to Thorne's left flank. He's minutes from crashing if we don't keep pressure. You a doctor too? Someone asked. No, I said, pulling gauze and sealant. Just someone who's done this too many times. Overhead, the sound of twin engines cut through the clouds. Echo 1 and Echo 2 broke the horizon, circling. I toggled my secure channel. Echo flight, we're down. Need perimeter overwatch. Possible ground movement within 6 clicks. Copy, Revenant, came the reply. You've got eyes in the sky. I stepped out of the bird. The air was thin, mountain sharp. I scanned the ridge with my own eyes. No thermal, no HUD, just old habits. Movement across the slope, too far for small arms. Enemy scouts, I said. Probably probing. They'll circle first. Test us. Why haven't they opened fire? One of the SEALs asked. I met his eyes. Because they're trying to confirm something. Confirm what? That it's really me. He stared. You're serious. Look around, I said. You think they set up a coordinated triple ridge ambush just for a SEAL recon? No offense, but this wasn't about you. You think they were after? Revenant, I said, finishing his sentence. Or at least the ghost of her. I moved back into the cockpit, popped a panel under the main console. Inside was a coded beacon, dead since 2019. I reconnected it to the bird's backup power. Sending ping to Allied Overwatch, I said. Last resort protocol. They'll triangulate and send an exfil if they believe I'm really me. And if they don't? Dyer asked. I looked out toward the ridge. Then we hold. And I finish what they started 7 years ago. Back then, I was assigned to Project Vela, a multi-nation black unit run through a network so compartmentalized. Even the ops commander didn't know who flew what. I flew Nightfall 6, extractions, sabotage, recovery, until the Belgrade cutout. That op broke everything. We pulled a diplomatic package from deep territory, only to discover we'd extracted the wrong target. Friendly fire. A back-channel agent. I tried to report it. The higher-ups didn't want truth. They wanted silence. I refused. Next morning, my bird was listed as destroyed in flight. They buried my name under a false report. Said I'd been compromised. Kia. But they never found a body, because I never gave them one. Now, their lie was unraveling. Because the woman they erased had just saved a SEAL team with nothing more than memory and muscle memory. I keyed the mic again. Command, Revenant transmitting ID Beacon Alpha, X7. Clearance Echo Prime. Confirm retrieval ETA. There was a pause. Then came the voice I didn't expect. Revenant, it said. Is it really you? It was General Amelia Rains. One of the few who'd ever read my full file. The one who vouched for me before everything went dark. It's me, I said. And I've got 8 American operators who will testify to it. I don't need them to, she said. I saw your flight path. That bird should have dropped 20 minutes ago. I almost smiled. You taught me how to push past limits. You broke them, she replied. Medevac inbound. 10 mics. Hold the ridge. We'll hold. I turned back toward the team. Thorne had stabilized. The others were positioned defensively around the plateau, watching every angle. Even the young ones looked different now, less cocky, more quiet. More like soldiers who'd seen what legends were supposed to look like. Dyer nodded at me. "I don't know who you were," he said, "but I'll follow who you are." The next 10 minutes passed with that kind of silence only found in people who've come back from the edge. The kind that wraps itself around you when the adrenaline fades, but your mind hasn't stopped calculating. Every seal on that ridge now moved with purpose, but the swagger was gone, replaced by alertness, respect, and a quiet fear, not of the enemy beyond the rocks, but of the revelation sitting calmly at the edge of the cockpit. Me. They'd stopped calling me Reyes. No one dared use my name at all. They just referred to me now in glances. She, her, Revenant, as if saying it too loudly might summon something worse than ghosts. I was refilling Thorn's 4 when Dyer approached again, crouching beside me with that cautious energy men use around something they've misjudged too deeply. "I reviewed your file once," he said quietly. "A redacted version. A pilot, they said, defected. NATO command erased the name, but they kept the legend alive, unofficially. Said she disappeared after Belgrade." I kept my eyes on the tubing. "What did your file say happened in Belgrade?" "That you ghosted a recovery mission, took the bird and bolted across an unapproved route. 3 operatives were killed during extraction. Friendly fire." I said nothing. "And that you were warned not to proceed. That you ignored the stand-down order." "That part is true," I said. "They told me to let a man die. I didn't." He looked away. "They buried a whole flight crew to keep that story quiet," I added. "Only I made it out. They thought I'd bleed out in the hills before anyone found me. I didn't. I made it to an Albanian safe house, and then disappeared into logistics. Someone helped me get reassigned under medical support clearance." "Why didn't you fight it? Clear your name?" I looked him dead in the eyes. Because by the time I could, the lie had saved powerful people, and I wasn't going to waste my breath shouting at walls. He nodded slowly, eyes flicking to the others. "They'll talk, you know. After this. When we get back. Let them. You're not afraid of what command will do." I pulled Thorn's blanket higher. "They already did the worst they could. Now, I'm just cleaning up after them." Across the ridge, Echo 1 called in. "We've got movement 2 clicks north-northwest. Heat signatures. Probably scouts." "Copy," I replied. "Hold visual. No engagement unless they close." I walked out onto the rock, scanning the slope. There they were, figures in sand-gray cloaks, moving with the slow deliberation of people who knew patience was deadlier than firepower. Dyer came up beside me, rifle ready. "Think they'll press?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not yet. They want confirmation. They want to be absolutely sure that the woman flying your bird was who they think. And when they are, then they'll either run," I said, "or they'll try to kill me the right way this time." He laughed, short, dry. "You talk about people trying to kill you like it's a weather report. I've had worse." He studied me for a moment. "Why come back at all? You could have disappeared forever, lived out your life in some quiet village, off-grid. But instead, you signed back in under a fake name and climbed onto our ride." "I never stopped watching," I said. "And I never stopped waiting for the moment I could set the record straight, not with speeches. With action." He nodded. "Well, mission accomplished." "Not yet," I said. "Bird's dead. We've got wounded. Enemy scouts. And no confirmed exfil. Command said 10 mics. Command also said I was a traitor." He grunted at that. "Fair point." I looked at him, suddenly serious. "You have to understand something, Dyer. When I disappeared, I didn't just lose my name. I lost the right to speak. Anything I said after that would sound like an excuse. So I waited. Waited for something like this, where the facts couldn't be twisted, where the outcome spoke louder than the narrative." "You planned all this?" "No," I said, "but I prepared for it." A crackle over comms. "Revenant, this is Eagle Dust. VTOL inbound. 5 minutes out. Smoke and mark landing zone. Secure perimeter." Dyer turned to the others. "You heard the woman. Smoke out. Secure the rock." I stayed by the ridge edge, still watching those scouts. They didn't move. Not yet. Maybe they were afraid. Or maybe they were remembering the last time they'd crossed Revenant, and how it ended in wreckage and whispers. As for me, I just waited, calm as the sky before the storm. Because sometimes the most powerful truth isn't in proving you were right. It's in surviving long enough to show them what wrong really looks like. A plume of red smoke curled into the sky, billowing against the pale backdrop of the high ridge. The SEALs had set the markers like I told them. North and west flanks painted with IR strobes, emergency beacon pulsing every 6 seconds from the tail of the crippled bird. The VTOL would see us. So would everyone else. "Eyes up," Dyer called, his voice crisp now, firm, grounded. "Perimeter tight. They want our pilot. They'll have to climb through hell." Funny how quickly a person's tone changes once they realize who's actually keeping them alive. I stood beside the wreck, arms crossed, listening to the wind thread through the mountains. I wasn't thinking about the exfil bird or the enemy scouts watching from the crags. I was thinking about how many times I'd stood in places like this, wondering if this would be the last landing. There's a sound in your blood when you're seconds from death. A thrum, like wires pulled too tight. I could hear it now. And still, I wasn't afraid. That part of me had gone quiet a long time ago. The first glimpse of the VTOL appeared over the southern rise, twin rotors humming like a hymn from above. It shimmered against the sun, painted in ghost gray with no insignia. Not military issue. Not entirely. I knew that design. Black sight gear. Which meant command was trying to be careful. No markings. No trace. Not even a tail number. "Here comes the cavalry," one of the SEALs muttered. "No," I corrected. "Here comes the cleanup crew." "What's the difference?" "One helps," I said. "The other just wants to erase the evidence." As the aircraft hovered above, a side ramp extended. 2 figures emerged, both in black tacked gear, no unit patches. One carried a medkit. The other had the eyes of a man used to making decisions no one could trace. The second one approached me directly. Tall. Burn scar on his left hand. Moved like someone who once led teams, now just carried orders. "Revenant," he said. Not a greeting. Just a statement. I didn't blink. "You're late. Securing your location wasn't easy. You're behind enemy lines." "I'm always behind enemy lines." He glanced at the SEALs, still on guard. Then back at me. "You weren't supposed to light the beacon. Then maybe you shouldn't have built one into my damn suit. That suit was assigned to a medic. Then you should have sent a real one." That shut him up for a moment. The medic moved past us, checking on Thorne and the others. The man in black stayed focused on me. "You've stirred up a lot of questions, Reyes. Command is in chaos." "Let them be," I said. "They've had 7 years to get their story straight. Now they can get their truth straight. They're already spinning this. You'll be debriefed. Discredited. Again." I stepped closer. "Then they'd better do it fast, because your whole network's about to find out that I'm not the ghost they thought I was. I'm worse. I'm proof." The wind caught my jacket as the VTOL settled, rotors blowing grit across the ridge. Dyer walked over, nodded toward the aircraft. "We ready?" "Yeah," I said. "Get the wounded aboard first." He gave me a look, longer than needed, then offered a hand. "Didn't get a chance earlier," he said. "To say thank you." "You did," I replied. "Every time you listened." He shook my hand. "You really going to let them take you again?" I gave a faint grin. They never really had me. The SEALs filed up the ramp. One by one, each looked at me differently now. Not like a medic, not even like a pilot, but like someone they'd follow into fire again if asked. Funny how fast truth burns through lies. Once everyone was aboard, I stood by the edge, watching the last rays of sun vanish behind the mountain peaks. I felt him beside me, burn scar, still watching. "They'll try to bury this," he said. "They already did," I replied. "I just dug it back up." "You could run." "Again." I nodded. "But I won't." "Why not?" I turned to him, quiet but absolute. "Because someone has to stand where they can't rewrite the ending." He said nothing. The ramp began to close. Inside, the SEALs sat in silence, some bandaged, others just watching me. The ones who'd once mocked the quiet medic now guarded me with their eyes like I was sacred. As the aircraft lifted off, I didn't look down at the ridge. I looked forward. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the part they couldn't control anymore. They took me to a base that technically didn't exist. No insignias, no identifiers, not even a runway. We landed on a flat patch of desert scrub surrounded by a wall of silence, as if sound itself had been redacted. They didn't cuff me. That would have been too obvious. But the armed escorts flanking me made it clear. I was still property, not a person. Burn scar, he never gave a name, led me through a maze of metal corridors, every wall painted the same bland gray. No photos, no glass, just long, narrow halls where you forgot what the sun felt like. They finally brought me into a room with one table, 3 chairs, and a single recorder blinking red in the center. Across from me sat 2 people I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. One was Brigadier Alice Monroe. Cold, polished, all edges. She once signed my deployment papers with a gold pen and a lie in her eyes. The other was Rear Admiral Thatcher Holt, who had once given me the flight commendation for an op they claimed never happened. I sat. Neither of them smiled. Holt spoke first. "You weren't supposed to come back. Yet here I am." Monroe leaned forward. "Why did you break protocol, Reyes? You weren't authorized to fly." I laughed. Quietly, but real. "You think this is about authorization? You exposed a classified beacon. Broke encryption barriers we installed to silence people like me?" I said. "You made me a ghost, and now you're mad I learned how to haunt you." They exchanged a glance. Monroe folded her arms. "Your record says you defected. And the SEAL team you just medevaced says I saved 8 lives. That's not enough to undo." "It's enough," I said, voice sharper now. "And you know it." I reached into my medkit. They tensed. I pulled out a sealed data drive. Laid it on the table. "What is that?" Holt asked. "The truth. Mission logs from Belgrade. Backup logs. The ones your cleanup crew missed." "You're bluffing." "Scan it," I said. I had 7 years to prepare. Monroe picked up the drive. Slipped it into a secured tablet. Her eyes scanned the first few entries, then froze. She looked up slowly. "You kept this all this time?" "No," I said. "I updated it. Every year. Every lie you added, I subtracted with fact." Holt exhaled. "Do you have any idea what this means?" "Yeah," I said. "It means you don't get to erase me anymore." They didn't arrest me. Not officially. But they didn't let me go, either. For the next 48 hours, I was moved between interviews, briefings, informal inquiries. Half the people in those rooms wanted me buried deeper. The other half wanted to parade me as a redemption story. I gave them neither. What I wanted wasn't recognition. It was correction. I asked for 2 things. My name, Isabel Reyes, restored in full rank and status. A full exoneration, publicly filed, so the next person they tried to disappear would know they weren't alone. They called it unusual. I called it justice. Eventually, someone folded. Word came through from someone higher than Monroe. Higher than Holt. The kind of authority you never see in uniform, never hear about in press releases. They called it reclassification of operational history. I called it the truth. I stepped out of that base at dusk, uniform cleaned, badge reissued. My call sign, Revenant, reinstated. But I didn't stay. I turned down the desk job, turned down the press statements, even turned down the commemorative ceremony they tried to hold at Ramstein. I wasn't interested in medals. I was interested in what came next. They mailed the medal. A bronze piece inside a velvet case, tucked beside a letter stamped with 6 layers of clearance and a signature I didn't recognize. It said I was being honored for extraordinary conduct under fire, though it conveniently skipped the part about being erased, disavowed, and left for dead. I left it unopened on my kitchen table for weeks. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I knew who that medal was really for. It wasn't for me. It was for them. For the institutions that needed a symbol to point to when they were asked, "Do you do right by your people?" The answer would be, "Of course. Look, we gave her a medal." But they hadn't given me back the years. They hadn't given me back the name that vanished off rosters. They hadn't returned the nights spent listening to my own voice in the dark, reminding myself I still existed. That's the thing no one teaches you about being erased. It doesn't happen with a bullet. It happens with silence. With no one saying your name for so long, you start wondering if you imagined it. And yet, there I was, standing in the same flight hangar I used to walk through in blackout gear, now in civilian boots and an outdated bomber jacket, watching new recruits jog by, saluting officers who never knew the wars we fought. I could have walked away, but I didn't, because that medal on my table wasn't going to rewrite what happened. But maybe, just maybe, I could. Not with politics, but with presence. I took a role in the medical corps, not frontline deployment. Logistics, support, casualty extraction training. They thought I'd want to fly again. Command even offered me a rotation behind the stick of a Nightbird or Raven. I declined, because I'd already proven everything I needed to prove up there. Now I wanted to teach someone else how to survive down here. I kept it simple. First aid under fire. Tactical movement with evac litters. Communication discipline under duress. But the lessons I actually taught weren't on the syllabus. They were things like, don't judge your teammate by the volume of their voice. Quiet doesn't mean coward. Never underestimate the medic in the corner. It didn't take long before whispers started circulating. Some of the younger soldiers started hearing about the ghost pilot in the training hangars. The one who never bragged, never lectured, but whose eyes made you sit up straighter. A few asked if I was the Revenant. I never confirmed. But they knew. You can't hide that kind of history forever. And maybe you shouldn't. Because the more people who knew the truth, the less likely it was to happen again. One day, I saw him again, Dyer. He came through on temporary assignment, now a senior chief. Carried himself heavier. More scar tissue. But his eyes were warmer. We grabbed coffee, sat on the hood of an old Humvee out behind the maintenance bay. He didn't say much at first. Just looked at me and nodded. They still don't deserve you. I shrugged. They don't have to. I'm not here for them. He held out something. It was the helmet strap from that ride. The one I'd tightened for him before the firefight. I kept this, he said. Reminds me not to assume. Not anymore. I took it, turned it over in my hands. You should keep it, I told him. You're the one who changed. He gave a short laugh. Maybe, but you're the one who made it safe too. It was weeks later when a knock came at the barracks, late, after lights out. One of the cadets from my last course stood there, awkward, half in uniform, half in apology. I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, she said. But I needed to talk to you. I waved her in, offered a chair. She hesitated, then sat on the edge like it might vanish under her. I heard what happened in Kandar Ridge, she said quietly. The Spectre report. That was you, wasn't it? I didn't answer. She stared down at her boots. They're saying a lot. Some call it luck. Others say it's just a myth that got out of control. I waited. But, she went on, I read your mission logs. The public declassified stuff. I saw the footage. The landing. The maneuver. That wasn't luck. Now I spoke. What do you want to know? Her eyes met mine. How did you stay quiet for so long? After what they did to you? I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the question settle. They took my voice, so I made my silence louder than anything they could write, I said. They wanted me erased. I let them forget me, until I could remind them with action. She nodded slowly. Some of us are afraid we'll never be seen for what we are. That if we're not loud, or obvious, or fit the mold, we'll always be passed over. I reached across and set the strap Dyer had given me on the desk between us. That was tightened by someone who thought I was useless, I said, and later kept it to remind himself how wrong he was. She picked it up, turned it gently. So what do I do? Learn everything, I said, not to prove them wrong, but to be ready when the moment finally proves you right. She stood to leave, eyes a little clearer. At the door, she paused. One more thing, she said. What does Revenant mean? I looked at her. Let the silence linger just long enough. It means they buried the wrong person. The base began adding new material to its leadership training. Emergency flight procedure case studies. Tactical command under duress. Critical silence as a combat asset. They didn't name me directly. But those who knew, they understood. It wasn't just about a flight that almost didn't land. It was about everything we assume, ignore, underestimate. And what happens when those assumptions collapse? The metal box remained unopened. But I did place it, quietly, on the wall of the training center beside a photograph. The wrecked helicopter perched on a crag, rotors still, sun bleeding through smoke. No caption, no name, just the image. Some would glance at it and walk on. But a few would stop and wonder what it took to land like that. And who was in the seat? Years pass. Bases change. Command rotations blur faces and policies, but stories, if they're true, live on. Especially the ones told in whispers. Somewhere between Syria and Djibouti, I heard a recruit describe the Revenant story like it was urban legend. A shadow pilot. A ghost. Some said she was AI. Others said she'd gone rogue. Some even claimed she didn't exist at all. I didn't correct them, because that's how legacy works. If it stays mysterious, it stays alive. I stayed in the medical corps. Never took a promotion. Never asked for reassignment. I kept tending to the wounded, teaching tactical trauma care, giving soldiers the skills they didn't know they'd need until everything fell apart. And I waited. Waited for the right kind of student, the one who listened more than they spoke. The one who sat at the back of the classroom, took notes no one else bothered with. The one who didn't posture. Those were the ones I passed it to. Not the name. Not the call sign. The truth behind it. That survival isn't about domination. It's about stillness. Composure when chaos burns through the sky. One day, a boy, not more than 9, ran up to me in the airfield's outer corridor. He had a small backpack and wore a handmade patch on his jacket. It read, "Hold tight. I've got this." "Ma'am," he asked breathlessly, "is it true you flew a bird with no pilot and saved the whole team?" I knelt beside him. "Where did you hear that?" "My sister's in training," he said. "They told her about you. She says you were erased, but you came back." I smiled. "Does that sound like something someone made up?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, it sounds like something someone survived." He ran off before I could say more, but his words echoed louder than he could know. I never flew another mission. But one evening, years later, I stood on a training runway, watching a new pilot prep her aircraft. She was smaller than the others. Quiet. Efficient. Nobody noticed how her hands worked faster, smoother, more precise. I watched her, and she saw me. She nodded once. Not a salute. A recognition. She didn't need to know my name. Because that girl? She'd already learned the most important part. That real strength doesn't shout. It flies through gunfire with a calm voice and steady hands, and saves everyone who thought she was just the medic. The last time I opened my footlocker, I pulled out my old patch. Revenant. I ran my fingers over the threads, faded now. I didn't put it on. I didn't need to. Because the point of a revenant is not that they come back. It's that they were never gone. Not really. And the world remembers. Not because of the medals, or the headlines, or the myths, but because someone stayed calm when the sky broke open and whispered, "Hold tight. I've got this." Thank you for watching. Have a great day.